Last time we were talking, Michael, you mentioned how the cross is kind of the price that God pays to create a world with this much freedom and so suffering. Could you elaborate on this a little bit more? And isn't the cross, I mean, it sounds really weird that a father would kind of torture and kill his son in order to save the rest of humanity. How do you make sense of that?
And I think it's a good question, especially when it's phrased that way. Because one of the questions we have to ask is, well, is that how it's described? And there are a couple of things I think to say straight away, maybe before we get into the meat of it. The first one is that Jesus himself said, "No one takes my life from me. Freely I lay it down, freely I pick it up again." So the idea that therefore he was some kind of unwilling third party in some transaction where the Father's torturing him for some other, that just doesn't fit with how Jesus himself talks about his own mission, or how Jesus himself speaks about why he's going to the cross. So I think the first thing we have to realize is that Christ was willing. I think the second thing that seems to be happening at the cross in relationship to the suffering side, just leaving the judgment aside for one moment, is that he says on the night he is betrayed, he takes a loaf of bread, he picks it up and he says, "This is my body broken for you." And at the point of going to the cross, Jesus Christ takes the brokenness in our lives that we have experienced and others have experienced, the pain, the hurt, all of the moral evil that we have suffered, the consequences of physical actions done by us and to us. He takes all of that on to himself and is literally broken for us. In other words, Christ unites us with himself and he takes that on to himself. He is willing to be broken and to take that which has gone wrong in us on into himself. And I think this is one of the things that Christians find both most incredible and also challenging at the same time. Because what we're saying is that all of these things we've been talking about have consequences. The choices that we make have consequences. The way things go wrong have consequences. All of it has consequence. And sometimes we wish we could divorce ourselves from the consequences of our own actions. Now, the cross isn't designed to divorce us from the consequences of our actions in that sense. What happens rather is that Christ is united with us, and it uses sort of like a marriage analogy, and then he then takes that bit within us, which is then broken. He's broken, he pays for it. He's risen to new life, he conquers over it, and now he comes and finds us and offers us this possibility of a new life with him, a new start. So I think it makes a lot of sense when looked like that. But it's connected, I think, very closely to the justice side of it too.
And that question of judgment, in light of what we talked about before, that God gives us our freedom to actually love or to not love. But it seems when you put justice in the equation or judgment in the equation, it's like you either love or I'm going to punish you or I'm going to do something to you. And that seems like very foreign to the way we were trying to explain the concept before. Could you explain that a little?
Yeah. Well, someone said, I think, quite well, and I think this can be helpful. Look, if I lent you my car and you crashed it, and you came back and you said, "Michael, I've crashed your car, I'm really sorry," and I say, "It's okay." It's not the fact I forgive you. It's not the fact, therefore, that no one pays. I pay. It's just that you don't pay for what you did. So it's not the question, therefore, that whenever forgiveness is exercised, it means that, therefore, no one has to pay. Actually, in certain circumstances, there's still a price to be paid. I think there's a bigger question, and we see it maybe very clearly articulated by, I can remember once being asked two opposing questions at the same conference. And one person phrased their question like this: "How do you expect me to be happy in heaven knowing God punishes people and sends them to hell?" Well, that's a really, really good question. The next question was, "How can I be happy in heaven if the person who sexually abused me as a child is there with me?" Now, you see what's happening there. One person is saying, if God exercises justice and punishes the guilty, I can't be happy in heaven. The other person saying, if God doesn't exercise justice and doesn't punish people who are guilty of terrible things, I can't be happy in heaven. So it's actually the same complaint, but actually with very opposite facing questions. Now, I think the complexity of the question is revealed when we start thinking about the nature of justice and mercy. Because by definition, mercy is always exercised at the expense of justice. So, you do something wrong, and I say, I forgive you. Well, when I say I forgive you, I'm saying, look, justice, Wasim says this, you should pay for this, or you should be punished for that, or whatever. But I'm not deciding to exercise justice, I'm deciding to exercise mercy. And by definition, that mercy is being exercised at the expense of justice. Otherwise, it wouldn't be mercy. That makes sense? It would be, if you've done a good thing, and I couldn't say I'm being merciful to you, I'm giving you this, I'm giving you what you deserve. Yep. Now, we often talk about God being merciful, but that causes a problem. Because that means that every time God is merciful, he does it at the expense of justice. Mm-hmm. But if God does it at the expense of justice, then that means he's not just anymore. So the question comes, how is God just and how does he exercise mercy? Now, in every religion of the world, God exercises his mercy at the expense of his justice. That's the only way he can do it. I'm not giving you justice, I'm giving you mercy. But in the Christian faith, God exercises his mercy through his justice. It's through the justice of the cross where God makes himself one with us, takes on to himself that which we have done wrong, and he pays the price. He pays the penalty. The law is fully upheld. What that sin deserves, that sin gets. Okay? That the requirements of the law and morality are fulfilled, and through the requirement of him paying, he now then offers us mercy through the justice of the cross to offer us forgiveness. So God doesn't exercise his mercy within the Christian gospel at the expense of his justice by saying, well, it doesn't really matter, forget about it. It does matter, but he pays. And by him paying, he then extends his mercy through that cross. And then that's what Christians call grace. What we're saying is, okay, look, we didn't deserve it, but it's not free in the sense that someone else has paid, namely God. And it's come at great cost. And it means, therefore, if you think about it, coming back to the woman who says, if my child abuser is in heaven, how's that fair? Well, the answer is, what that child abuser did deserved death. If they have repented before God and said sorry, and they are now forgiven by him and will be in paradise, it's not that no one paid for that sin. Christ has paid for that sin on the cross. He took it on. Justice is upheld.
Can I push that a little bit? How is it justice when someone pays for someone else? You mentioned us being united with Christ.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
I think, again, one of the biblical examples which is used and other people have picked up on is one of marriage. When two people become married, they're still two people. Their identity isn't confused, but the rights and debts of one also become those of the other. So in most systems of law, if the husband marries a wife, the debts of the husband will become the debts of the wife. Now they can pay it off together. Now they say, well, it's something similar is happening on the cross, except Jesus doesn't work with us to pay off our debts with us. He pays off our debts for us. He has a credit of righteousness that we don't have. So when we become one with him, he takes our debts and he gives us his righteousness, which is again another theme that Jesus picks up on and the Bible picks up on, the idea that, okay, it's true, we have to be right before God ultimately, but God gives that to us as a gift, which is why Christians can't boast on it, which is why the Christian faith should be inherently humbling. One of the great dangers in our world is that people who have conviction about God can sometimes either be very arrogant or very hostile. But the Christian faith should be inherently humbling, because what it's saying is, look, yes, there is a God. Yes, he does love you. Yes, what you have done is serious. So serious, actually. It's deserving of ultimate judgment. But God himself is willing to step in. So the reason for me the story becomes coherent is that, of course, none of this proves that God does actually exist. But what it does mean is that God isn't caught between these two demands, because they're both met within him. and he does it through the making of himself of one with us. So when someone says yes to becoming a Christian, they're not now saying, look, I've figured everything out in my head, I now think I'm perfect, I now think I'm worthy. They're not saying any of those things. What they're saying is, look, I've done things which are wrong. I know they need to be forgiven. I know that you're willing to pay the price for me. You know, I want to be one with you, that what you have done may be for me, and that I may actually have something which I don't deserve. And that should actually be humbling in the life of the believer. It should be deeply humbling. Which is why the Apostle Paul says, look, I've got nothing to boast of apart from the cross of Christ. And I can't boast in anything apart from that, because it's not me. It's not like I've figured things out in my head and my heart and my life, and therefore God looks at me and thinks, oh, what a good person, I'll let you into heaven. That's not it at all. It's because God himself has made a provision, he himself has made a way, he himself has made an offer, he's made a promise, and because I'm relying on what he has done. So I can boast about what he has done for me, but I can't reverse engineer it and boast myself. And I think when the church has boasted, it's been of itself, it's often ended up looking very ugly. But when it's acted and responded in humility and said, well, actually, it's not because of us, it's because of him, it's different.
This concept of someone taking my place,
Yeah.
that Christians talk about all the time, do you not think that this can cause people to say, like, I'm getting off easy, like I'll do whatever I want to do, and then I'll say I'm sorry, and then everything's going to be okay? Like, how do you think about that?
Interestingly enough, the Apostle Paul actually makes a very similar point, saying, well, look, is it because of this grace and this forgiveness that means I can just sin all the more and do whatever I want wrong, just keep coming back asking for forgiveness, and it's always there, so it doesn't matter how I live? I think the best way to think about that is relationally. If I do something wrong against my wife and she forgives me, and then I do the same thing wrong and I go to her and I say I'm sorry and she forgives me, and then I do the same thing again and I say I'm sorry, forgive me, and again and again and again and again, eventually it becomes less convincing each time I say I'm sorry in my own heart and mind, and it becomes less convincing in hers. Because the question is, but Michael, if you meant this, surely you would stop. If you wanted to stop hurting me and you felt that this was wrong, then why are you doing it again and again and again and again and again? And I think we can see the same thing in terms of our relationship with God. To be truly repentant, to be truly sorry about something, means not just simply that you regret it, that you feel guilty, but you don't want to do it, that you're turning away from it. And that's what the word repentance in the Greek word, literally metanoia, means. It means to change your mind. It means to go in a different direction. It means, okay, I was acting this way and thinking this way and going this way, and now I'm going to go this way, 180-degree opposite. And if there is no turning at all, ever, then I think we can conclude, okay, maybe the person feels guilty, and that's why they're saying sorry. But that's not the same as true repentance. True repentance is more than just feeling guilty and saying sorry. You can feel guilty because you've been caught, but you may not truly actually be sorry. You may not even think what you've done is ultimately wrong. So I think the answer to that is, at the center of the Christian faith, there is a loving relationship with God. And you want that relationship to grow and to deepen and to mature. And that relationship can't grow and deepen and mature by going through that meaningless cycle over and over and over again. There has to be a break at some point for it to be meaningful, for it to lead into a meaningful relationship.
Thank you.